The Behind the Book lecture series is made possible by World eBook Library, the world's largest database of portable ebooks for academic research, and the World Heritage Encyclopedia, the world's knowledge at your fingertips.
The Iliad is one of these kind of essential works of culture, particularly Western culture. The combination of what the story is, the plot, the characters, combined with how it's told, makes it, on one hand, both really accessible, but the actual kind of epic poetry of it makes it like this almost theatric experience.
So many of today's common ideas and stories are built upon ideas that have come before, and those ideas set in motion revolutions that have changed the world.
Today, we are in the information age. We take knowledge for granted, but back then, ideas, particularly if they were different, were considered dangerous.
Machiavelli departed from conventional teachings as espoused by the Catholic Church.
Marx became so infamous that he was kicked out of more than one country.
It wasn't as if he was in love with the character of Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes was an extremely profitable character for him.
These are the stories that have inspired us to make the modern world we have today.
Homer is almost a mythological author, the subject of many stories and legends that were created long after he lived. Many legends hold that Homer was a blind, wandering bard who entertained during public gatherings. Whether he was a legend or a real person, Homer is credited by the ancient Greeks as being the first and greatest of the epic poets. Homer is credited with adding his own flourishes and innovations to the stock story of Achilles and the Trojan War. He recognized that what he was doing was popular. This is becoming an important enough story that more and more people need to hear about it. Maybe that's when he decided, hey, I've got all this stuff stored in my memory, maybe I ought to write it down. Something like the Iliad really set down to what extent, hey, our history has really been shaped by these forces outside our control, and they became parables that they could learn from. Something that people could touch upon of like, look, the gods are really important in our life. Like, we have to pay attention to this. If we forget them, we forget them at our own peril. If you're a sailor, you better make your sacrifices to Poseidon, otherwise you could fall prey to what happened to the Greeks when they were run over on the beaches. So many of the Greeks, I think, are kind of not very admirable characters. But I think Hector is the one who recognizes that the Trojans are kind of in a messed up situation, and he's just got to try to make the best out of it. He doesn't want to be in this war, but he's got to defend his family. And so he tries to, I think, act honorably. And in some sense, he's the hero, even though he is turned into a villain for a major portion of the story. So the Greeks had all these city-states, right, spread out. They didn't have a country like we have today with a national identity. The Spartans and the Athenians recognized that they were both Greek, but what kind of tied them together in some type of identity was cultural works like this. These are the things that we value. These are the characters that we know. These are the things that we can share an appreciation of. And so it survived because it became, I think, a way of people really relating to each other, right? Oh, Achilles, we all know about Achilles. Achilles is admirable. This is the type of person you should strive to be. Or no, Achilles is not really the type of person we strive to be. But because there's that controversy built into it, it's going to help a culture kind of sustain itself. And not even for the Greeks at the time, but even after, once the Romans or later cultures became kind of the more ascendant civilizations, they were able to look back at these aspects of Greek culture, at what came to be known as Greek culture, and say, this is what made them interesting. These are things that we should really think about in terms of our own cultural identity. So it kind of really set the bar for what it meant to be a civilization, both kind of artistically in terms of how you communicate artistically your values, but also just in terms of characters and traits and values that your civilization struggles with. part of the interesting thing here is to think about this as both a historical event and as a literary event. There was a German archaeologist he said he discovered Troy. And you can go now to Turkey and you can go and see where this was Troy. They have evidence of this huge city with huge walls. It's right there kind of up against the coast. That will change your perspective on this event. And it all of a sudden makes you ask that question, like, how much of this is real, right? This text, I think, it reinforced for the Greeks how much their life was not in their own hands. There was something that happened here, and all we have to access it is this epic that's lasted for now more than 2,000 years. And it's kind of humbling to recognize that there's a story that's 2,500 plus years old that's about a historical event that's more than 3,000 years old.